Hi, this is Nancy Woodruff at Sassy's Opinion, and I wanted to say something else as far as the man in Japan who kidnapped his children and my story with my ex-husband, Philip, and my daughter, Nikki. Heather, really, but she hates that name, so she's going with Nikki. Anyway, I'd like to say that in the United States of America, we have allowed a very atrocious thing to happen. Very horrible, very horrible. And that is weekend parenting by fathers. Court systems generally give sole custody to one person, and I'd like to know why. Here's their excuse. Well, the children will get confused if they go to each parent. I mean, how can they possibly go to the father either half the time or should they go in the evenings? Should they go every weekend? Should they do this? Should they do that? Well, you know what? That is silly. That is so silly, because women, you got no problem putting your children in daycare. Sorry, I'm a little perturbed by this whole issue that the United States has and this whole weekend father thing. Don't you understand how much your spouses, the fathers, are missing their children, or mothers are missing their children, or the children are missing their fathers? It's very vital to them. If you chose to get married and you chose to have children, or you chose not to get married and you chose to have children, then don't you think that the honorable thing to do is to allow the other person to have just as much time with the children as you? That's silly for you to think that your children are going to get confused and to let anybody make you think that way. If you don't have any reason for your ex to see the children, for example, while you were married, didn't your ex see the children all the time? Now, I've already explained why I left my ex, and that's because he was a very cruel person, and he said horrible things, and he was very sarcastic all the time. He wasn't physically abusive in any way, but he was mean. He was mean. He really was. He was mean. And he'd say terrible things to me, and then he'd say things like, what do I have to do, put a joke sign on my forehead? He had me crying every single day, but you know what? How could that possibly be his fault? That comes from what I learned when I was growing up, from parents who didn't know how to teach me self-esteem. Had I had the self-esteem that I have today, I never would have married somebody like him. I never would have got into a relationship with somebody like him. It just wouldn't have never happened. But it is what it is, and it was what it was. And we did what we did, and I feel bad about him not getting to see her half the time. But at the same time, I could say that she didn't pick up all those bad personality traits that he has. And this is the problem that this woman in Japan has. Now, if the United States had another way, if there was some kind of a way of counseling, if there was some kind of way of living next door to each other, I think that's what you ought to do. If you're not going to be together, live next door. Figure out a way. Live in the same apartment complex. Live somewhere close by so that your children can run back and forth between the two of you. But you better not let them out of your sight. Don't you let them go back and forth without you watching. Didn't you see what happened to that 11-year-old girl? Taken at knife point? Thank God he didn't hurt her. Thank God he didn't kill her. Thank God he let her go. Thank God he didn't molest her. It's our fault. We let our children walk to school alone, but we wouldn't let them stay inside the house alone for 2 hours. Kindergartners, first graders walking to the bus stop alone, y'all better be thinking about that. And you better stop keeping your children from the parent that loves them. I think that the idea of the super nanny is a great idea. However, I think instead of going there and going home, and going there and going home, that whoever goes in needs to stay for 2 weeks. And be the person that explains. Don't step back like the super nanny does. Get involved right then and there. Say what needs to be said. Get involved. Help those people to understand what they're doing. If you need to videotape them to show them how they're acting and so that they can see it, so be it. Wonderful thing it is. Wonderful thing to see how you really act. Believe me, I know, because I've accidentally videotaped myself when I didn't know it. But those have been the things that have made me change. They really have. And I'm sorry about the weekend father thing. And I'm sorry what the courts are doing. There's a lot more that I have to say about that, but not right now. Thank you for listening.